If you've watched any of my videos before, you know I am a huge fan of the fantasy romance genre. So naturally, I watched Bridgerton because it's a fantasy and there's lots of romance. Hello, it's Ashley, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about all things Bridgerton Season 2. Before I get into everything, if you could please take a moment to subscribe to my channel, it would mean the absolute world to me. This is your one and only spoiler warning. I am going to be talking about everything that happened in Season 2, as well as things that happened in the Bridgerton book series. Okay, let's chat about my overall thoughts of Season 2. It was a very slow burn romance. Extremely slow. Did I mention it was slow? Still as immensely popular as Season 1. I have been trying to rack my brain to understand overall why the show is so popular and why I've watched it. Because if I'm honest, the plot, the storyline, the dialogue is not as good as it could be. I absolutely adore the costumes. I adore the fact that we are watching something that has a lot of representation in it in terms of racialized communities. I absolutely adore the classical renditions of modern pop songs that we see in the show. I love romance. I just think that Bridgerton, it's better if we don't think of it as a historical romance. It's easier to watch and take in if you think of it as a complete fantasy. It's not the real Regency period because there is so many historical inaccuracies. They're not even worrying about being historical, which is fine. It's more of a fantasy romance. And since I love fantasy romance, naturally, I love Bridgerton. Does that make me, silly? I find there's such a stigma to things that traditionally women would love, like romance novels. Fine, like even when I say I love Bridgerton, I'm like, do I really love it? Is that the stigma saying, do I really love it? Or is that me saying it? Why are the Bridgertons such a prominent, well thought of family? Do you find yourself ever wondering that? I mean, is it because they have all these ridiculously good looking children? Is it because they have to be for the purposes of the plot? You hear characters say they're like this prominent, well-to-do family, and I'm just thinking to myself, why? Why? I mean, they were embroiled in scandal in Season 1 where Colin almost gets married to Marina, and Lady Whistledown publishes that Marina was trapping him because she's pregnant with some other guy's child. What happened to that scandal? Also in this show, you see like nobody shows up to their ball at one point. They're being cut while they're on the promenade. I don't know, why are they so prominent? It doesn't really make sense to me. Shouldn't they be like falling from grace after all of that? Like, how do they bounce back so quickly? Now, I want to do a little bit of a comparison between the Viscount Who Loved Me book and Season 2. It's very loosely based on the book. Let me say that. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. So in the book, we do have a few key things happen, which happen in the show, like the traumatic bee stinging of Edmund, where he dies. Oh my gosh. The bee sting scene between Kate and Anthony, that could have been done way better. In the book, he sucks out the venom. He sucks out the venom. Why didn't they have him suck out the venom in the show? This is Bridgerton after all. One of the key differences between the book and the show is what they do with Edwina's character. Edwina in the book, she never would have said to Kate, oh, you're only my half-sister. She never would have been that angry at Kate because Kate was so dedicated to Edwina's happiness. Kate was so close with Edwina and Edwina with Kate. In the book, Edwina actually isn't even really truly in love with Anthony. She's actually ends up being in love with this other man who's more like academic and a book reader like her. And I think it makes more sense if Edwina is coming to Kate and saying, actually, I'm in love with this other person and I think you're in love with Anthony. In the book, there is no wedding scene between Edwina and Anthony. I did not understand in the show why Kate and Edwina could not just have a conversation where Kate admits that she's into Anthony. I also don't understand why Edwina fell in love with Anthony. Like, they're so clearly different. They have such different, like, she didn't even want to play Pall Mall, and this was like Anthony's favorite game. You know, there's clearly interests that overlap between Kate and Anthony and almost no interest that overlap between Edwina and Anthony. All of the tension could have been resolved if Anthony and Kate had an honest conversation, if Kate and Edwina had an honest conversation, or if Edwina and Anthony had an honest conversation. I didn't think the premise of why the tension exists was very good. Overall, though, I did enjoy scenes between Kate and Anthony. I did enjoy that dynamic. Lady Danbury. I love Lady Danbury's character, but in the book, Lady Danbury isn't a huge player in the whole romance between Kate and Anthony. In the show, she is the sponsor of Kate and Edwina, and I'm thinking to myself, like, that's a bit of a repeat to the story in season 1, right? Like in season 1, Lady Danbury's the support person for Simon, who ends up courting Daphne. And in season 2, Lady Danbury's the support person for Edwina, who ends up courting Anthony. And I'm like, so is that going to be Lady Danbury's role every season going forward? Or are we going to see less of her? I mean, I do really love her. They've got to figure out what they're going to do with her. Is she always going to just be like this background player? I know they're doing a spin-off that's going to focus on Queen Charlotte. Maybe young Lady Danbury's in that. If you know, comment down below and tell me.
Let's talk about Pride and Prejudice and Bridgerton.
The meet cute between our main characters, Kate and Anthony. It gave me a lot of Pride and Prejudice vibes, you know, the way they're kind of competitive and Kate's so headstrong and basically bests Anthony at horse riding, and Anthony's trying to be this gentleman, and Kate tells him that he thinks too highly of himself, and she questions his character. Like, so much Pride and Prejudice, like Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy vibes in that first scene. I was just kind of like, meh, I guess. I mean, I know that these are the two that are going to eventually get together, so I was like, okay, this is how they meet. Edwina is like our Jane Bennet type character. Obviously, it's not exactly the same plot, but I think my problem with getting those vibes was I found myself comparing it to Pride and Prejudice, and I do like Pride and Prejudice more. I do like the 1990s BBC adaptation a lot.
Okay, let's go to chatting a little bit about the Bridgerton characters.
Eloise and Benedict. I love their relationship. It's very cute, very sweet. Overall, I find Benedict's plot lines tend to either frustrate me or just put me off a little bit. I find I'm not as interested in Benedict's story, and if the show is going to focus on Benedict next because that was the next book that Julia Quinn published, then it's going to be a whole season about Benedict. Now, the only thing that would make me really excited about that is if they actually make Benedict gay and make his love interest a man. If they do that kind of gender swapping, I'd be super happy, because in season 1, I felt like they were going to make him gay, and then he ended up not being gay, and then I felt like that whole plot line was queer baiting. If you want to hear my thoughts on some of the things that were wrong with season 1, I will link my video about that up above. I'm not going to nitpick season 2, though, the way I nitpicked season 1, because I think I've just accepted that the plot and the world building and everything is weak. I've accepted that it's sometimes historical and sometimes not. And like I said, I pretend it's a fantasy romance rather than historical romance, and I find I can enjoy the scenery, the costumes, some of the romance, which is what it mainly has to offer. Let's talk a little bit about Newton, the corgi. I actually thought we were going to see a lot more of Newton. He's in the book a lot more. When I did see him in the show, I mean, he was a cute corgi, but he wasn't really a presence in the show, if you know what I mean. He was kind of like, okay, here, there's a dog in the book, so we're going to put him in the show. I loved season 1 because I loved Marina. She is ultimately one of my all-time favorite Bridgerton characters thus far. She is not in the books at all, but I loved her. I loved her in season 2 when she tells Colin to look forward and not backward. I love that, you know, she hasn't had an easy life. She's had highs, she's had lows. She's now building a life with her children and with the brother of her love. And her storyline is complex, and I think one of the more well thought out parts of the plot in the actual show. Let's talk about Penelope. Penelope is one of my favorite characters. Penelope impersonating a servant in order to get Lady Whistledown published and published at an affordable rate. I loved that. I was confused though, if Penelope is so savvy, why couldn't she see the whole Ruby's being fake debacle happening? Why isn't she caring about where their money for their family is going to come from? That part was a little confusing. Overall, I do love Penelope and Colin. I felt like it got a little bit too gossip girly where they were doing twists with Penelope and Colin's relationship that were a bit unnecessary and a bit, I don't know, silly. I really like that Penelope turns a perceived weakness. So Cressida calls her an insipid wallflower. People aren't asking her to dance. Instead, she's just walking around, seeing everything that's going on, eavesdropping on what the servants say. And that actually becomes her strength because that's what she uses to write Lady Whistledown in addition to her writing talent. So that's really cool how they turn her weakness, she turns her weakness into a strength. And I really like that about Penelope. I think the whole kind of white feminism that Eloise has and is trying to impart on her friend Penelope and through Penelope on Lady Whistledown, it just fails. Like, she's just all Lady Whistledown and seemingly all of the characters of the show for the most part care about is who's getting married, who's dating, who's together, and why. And I feel like it would be a little bit better of a show if they put in some more elements of life beyond just who's marrying who's dating who. That's just my opinion. I like a lot of that stuff. I just want a little bit more of the other stuff.
Here are my final thoughts on season 2 of Bridgerton.
There was a lot more sex in season 1. Season 2 is all about the slow burn, and there's one sex scene. And Jonathan Bailey, who plays Anthony, I love his acting. I love the acting of Ashley Simone, who plays Kate. But I just preferred the relationship of the Duke and Daphne in season 1. I don't know if I wasn't in the mood for slow burn or it was too slow burn. I think it might have been too slow burn. Like, I needed them to get together a bit sooner than they actually did. You know what I mean? So Bridgerton season 2, what did you think of it? Are you going to read the books? Have you read the books? Comment down below. Let me know. In the meantime, this is Ashley saying happy watching, happy reading. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.